since Michael and Sarah are coming back for the childbirth. Please get out, my mother-in-law said coldly. Michael, her eldest son, and his wife were coming back in 3 days. Me? I have to leave? I asked, shocked. Yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been unnecessary for a while now. Michael and his family will be living here, so make sure you're out by tomorrow, she continued. I knew I was never truly accepted as part of the family. Since the day I got married, I was only treated as a wife. I never imagined that after all these years they would tell me to leave. You barren failure. You were allowed to experience raising a child. You should be grateful. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too, she added. Simon too. I swallowed hard. If it's not just a conspiracy between my mother-in-law and Michael, then I don't need to respect my husband anymore. It was foolish of them to drive me out, but my mother-in-law started this. What happens to this house is no longer my concern. May they face the reality they've ignored directly and personally. I'm Anna Thompson, 45 years old, living with my husband and mother-in-law in a popular area close to the station. It's really convenient to get to the city center. When we were looking for a house, my husband, who had just been promoted to a managerial position, was very picky. The rent was high, but the space and number of rooms made it worth it. My husband, Simon, is 8 years older than me and divorced. I met him through a friend's introduction. His kindness, typical of an older man, comforted me, and after 2 years of dating, we decided to get married. Even when I told him about my infertility due to a past illness, his affection did not change. Similarly, my feelings for him remained unchanged when I learned about his situation. Simon has a son named Michael from his previous marriage. I'm truly sorry to ask you, who have never been married before, to live with my parents and son. I won't make you suffer in any other way. I'll make sure you're happy, he promised. To prevent me from feeling suffocated, my husband suggested moving to a spacious apartment where I could have my own room. Michael is turning 10 this year, and with my mother-in-law around, he won't need much care. You don't have to push yourself, Simon said. After his divorce, my husband got help with childcare from his parents at their home. A few years later, Simon's father passed away in an accident, and his mother took over as Michael's caretaker. From the first meeting, Michael wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I thought he might be shy and at a difficult age, so I didn't worry about it. As long as they accepted me as a member of the household, I was content. My mother-in-law was a quiet and refined person. When I visited to formally introduce myself after our engagement, she treated me so politely that I thought we would get along fine living together. I'll continue to prepare the meals as I have been. Simon comes home late, so it's okay if we eat at different times, right, Anna? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. All right, let's work well together, she said. After getting married, I switched from being a full-time employee at the pharmacy to a full-time part-timer because of the division of household chores. I started work a bit later in the morning and wouldn't get home until nearly 8:00 p.m., but dinner was always ready when I arrived. This was one thing that made me feel good about living together. I'll continue to prepare the meals as I have been. Simon comes home late, so it's okay if we eat at different times, right, Anna? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. All right, let's work well together, my mother-in-law said. After getting married, I switched from being a full-time employee at the pharmacy to a part-timer because of the division of household chores. I started work a bit later in the morning and wouldn't get home until nearly 8:00 p.m. But dinner was always ready when I arrived. This was one thing that made me feel good about living together. My mother-in-law and Michael usually had dinner before I got home, so I was always eating alone. Even after getting married, I sometimes felt a sense of, is this it? But I came to accept that this was our family style. However, from the beginning, my mother-in-law never really liked me and didn't consider me part of the family at all. Michael, the school's activity day is before summer, right? When is it? We're all going to see you, I asked, trying to break the ice with Michael, who still hadn't warmed up to me. No, Michael hesitated, and my mother-in-law interjected. We'll go there, just Simon and me. Anna, you don't need to worry about it. I misunderstood her words, thinking she was just being considerate. I can get the day off work. Let's all go together, I suggested. You don't need to do that. You're Simon's wife, and Michael's family has always been just Simon and me, my mother-in-law replied. I was shocked by her response. When I talked to my husband about it that night, he said, Mom's been clinging to Michael. She probably thinks you're trying to take him away. I'll talk to her eventually. I tried to join as a mother at school activity days, but Michael and I rarely spent any time together outside of these events. Sometimes I could tell Michael wanted to say something, but my mother-in-law always interrupted us. Later, I found out she had been badmouthing me to Michael. Anna said she could be happy with Simon if Michael weren't around. She's a terrible person. Dad must be deceived by her too, she told him. If a boy in his formative years hears such things, it's not surprising that he would distrust me. It was a sickening story, but at that time, I couldn't imagine my mother-in-law could do such a thing. After graduating high school, Michael immediately moved in with his girlfriend and left home. As soon as he started college, he married her without a ceremony. Once Michael moved out, my mother-in-law surprisingly stopped doing housework altogether. Instead, it seemed that picking on me had become her sole entertainment. She stopped cooking and just sat at the dining table waiting for me to come home. Without a moment to sit down, I would stand in the kitchen and prepare dinner. "You're really inefficient. At this rate, it'll take you all night," she would say. I was never good at cooking, partly because I had always relied on my mother-in-law to prepare the meals. Whenever I did manage to cook, she would taste each dish and invariably complain. "This tastes awful." "I'm sorry, I'm trying my best." "You're astonishingly tone deaf when it comes to flavors, Anna. It's a good thing Michael never had to eat this." How terrible. If she thought so, she might as well make it herself, but it seemed she just wanted to complain to me. She didn't just nitpick the meals, but also started criticizing everything from the cleaning to the laundry. "Why are there so many wrinkles on the laundry? You have to vacuum every nook and cranny. You really can't do anything right. Didn't your family teach you anything?" She sighed, looking at me with disdain. Being belittled about my family made me clench my fists in frustration. "I don't know how you won over Simon, but I can't see much charm in you as a woman," she always concluded with the same line. "If you hadn't come, Michael would have never left." I understood that there was a gaping hole in her heart since Michael left. Maybe it was what they call empty nest syndrome. If taking it out on me made her feel better, that's what I told myself to endure it. But her bullying intensified after a certain event, the pregnancy announcement from Michael's wife, Sarah. The joy my mother-in-law exhibited was unlike anything I had seen before. "It's Michael's baby, it's bound to be adorable. Yeah, it'll be my first grandchild." Watching the two of them rejoice, I was happy too, but my mother-in-law's excitement was beyond normal. Michael asked her, "Grandma, can Sarah have our baby at your place?" Sarah's family home is an hour away by plane, and since they have no one else to rely on here, they turn to us for help. Of course, my mother-in-law wouldn't dream of turning down Michael's request. The phone calls for Michael started to become frequent, and her excitement went through the roof. The next day after getting the news, she started preparing enthusiastically, from cleaning out Michael's room to preparing the bedding and making a list of baby items. It was like she had grandchild fever. Naturally, I had to get involved too. When I returned from work, she'd say, "Anna, I vacuumed Michael's room, so you need to wipe the floors and the windows and please wax them too. This weekend we're going to the department store to look at baby cribs." Cleaning and waxing at night was tough, especially after a long day at work. If I even thought about cutting corners, I'd be told to do it over again. Moreover, my mother-in-law started asking for money, and before I knew it, the house was overflowing with baby stuff. "Anna, I need you to withdraw some money tomorrow. There are things I want to get ready for the baby." Again, isn't it wasteful to prepare so much when Sarah and Michael haven't even arrived? Shouldn't we wait and choose together with them? I wanted to meet my mother-in-law's requests, but was troubled by the relentless spending. "How can you be so cold? It's Simon's grandchild." "Oh, that's right, you're not related to Michael by blood. You don't care, do you?" "That's not true. Please don't say that. I just thought Sarah might want to pick things out herself. Wouldn't you want to choose things for your own child?" Perhaps because I was making a valid point, my mother-in-law glared at me sharply. I immediately thought I had gone too far, but it was too late. Without a word, my mother-in-law went back to her room looking upset. I did reflect on it, but I was also shocked to be spoken to in such a way about Michael. The next morning, my mother-in-law didn't come out of her room, perhaps still angry. Simon had a 3-day business trip starting that day, so he just called out, "I'm leaving," through her door. "Please don't throw cold water on Mom's great-grandchild fever. She hasn't been the same since Michael left. You were worried too, right?" he said. I was, but if we spend all our money like this, we'll have nothing left when Michael and Sarah arrive, right? Simon's face immediately turned sour. "Are you saying my earnings are too low?" "That's not what I'm saying at all," I replied. Simon just said, "Fine," and left with a look of dissatisfaction. Discussions about money always ended up like this. Since I managed our finances, I couldn't help but think ahead. We've been married for 13 years. Simon had always provided me with a comfortable life. Your part-time income is for you to enjoy, Simon had always told me, so I saved everything beyond what I needed for myself. Even though it's in my name, I consider it our shared property. But then Simon's company's performance declined, and over the last 5 years, his salary dropped to 2/3 of what it was when we first got married. With uncertainty about whether his company will last until his retirement, he doesn't seem to consider changing jobs for appearance's sake. In front of my mother-in-law, my husband couldn't give up his title as a department head. Now, I'm the one paying the rent, and he covers the living expenses. We've kept this from my mother-in-law to save my husband's face. That day, I left work a bit early to apologize to my mother-in-law. When I got home, she was already sitting at the dining table waiting for me. "I'm sorry about yesterday. I went too far," I said. But my mother-in-law didn't respond. Instead, she blindsided me with something else. "Since Michael and Sarah are coming back for a hometown childbirth, please get out," my mother-in-law stated in a chilly voice. The return of her eldest son and his wife was scheduled in 3 days. "Me, I have to leave?" I asked, confused and stunned. "Yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been redundant for a while now. Michael and his family will be living here, so make sure you're out by tomorrow," she continued. I knew I was never truly accepted as part of the family since the day I got married. I've been treated as a wife thus far, but I should have suspected something when Michael was coming back for the birth. "You barren failure. You were allowed to experience raising a child. You should be grateful," she said. "We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too." "What, Simon too?" I asked, shocked. "Yes, maybe he's getting on well with a new girlfriend by now," my mother-in-law said. I gulped down my saliva. Could such a thing be happening? Lately, my relationship with my husband had grown distant. Could it be a trap? I couldn't believe my husband would do that. I remembered that up until a year ago, he never had overnight business trips. "All right, I'll be out tonight," I said, grabbing my bag and leaving the house to walk aimlessly. I needed to calm my severely shaken heart and was worried about my husband. As I walked, I tried calling my husband's cell phone. Despite what my mother-in-law had said, I still wanted to talk to him, but he didn't answer, no matter how many times I rang. So I called his office and was told he had taken a couple of days off. My mother-in-law's words started to seem more credible. Could he really be on a trip with another woman? Bad thoughts began to crowd my mind, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. Tears streamed down my face. As I staggered along, I noticed the tavern behind the station. It was a place we used to go often when we first moved here. "It's still here," I thought as I went inside. "Welcome," the tavern owner said. His expression clouded for a moment when he saw me, then he nodded slightly in recognition. Did he remember me? "Hey, long time no see. It's been about 8 years. I used to come here a lot with my husband." "Yes, it's been a while. I remember you," he replied. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "Can I get a beer and a mixed plate of grilled chicken, please?" "Sure," the owner said. He was always a man of few words, and that hadn't changed. I took out my cell phone, and the screensaver lit up. It was a photo of us when Michael turned 18, looking sharp in the slim suit we had picked out together. I really wanted us to be closer as a family. As I looked on, a waitress brought over the beer and grilled chicken. The cold beer washed down easily. My throat felt soothed as I drank the beer, and it seemed to wash away the day's fatigue. Could I really move out tomorrow? I searched for moving companies that could do the job the next day, and found one. I also looked up junk buyers and saved 2 companies in my favorites. Changing the screensaver on my phone seemed to clear my head completely. The beer and the grilled chicken tasted exceptional. I decided to think about everything once I got home. As I started walking away from the tavern, I heard someone call out behind me. Turning around, I saw a young waitress from the tavern running towards me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Thompson?" she asked. Yes, that's me," I responded, wondering if there really were such things as divine interventions. "Your husband, he's having an affair with one of our employees." Her youthful sense of justice was apparent, so that was the look on the owner's face. My husband was still coming to the tavern, involved with a longtime part-time female worker. When there aren't many customers, they talk the whole time and leave together after closing. "They're always all over each other. It's really gross," she said. I couldn't help but give a sad smile at her frankness. We exchanged contact information. "I'll let you know if anything happens," she said, which felt reassuring to me, who had no allies. My mother-in-law's words were true. Maybe because my head had cleared, instead of sadness, I felt a rising anger within me. I decided to go all out and finish this. I booked an appointment with one of the moving companies I had saved earlier. If it wasn't just a conspiracy between my mother-in-law and Michael, then I suppose I no longer needed to honor my husband. I thought it foolish to be driven out, but it was my mother-in-law who had sparked this. Whatever becomes of this house now is not my concern. When I got home, I packed my belongings until midnight without hesitation. The moving company I had booked for exactly 2:00 p.m. arrived on time. I'm moving out today. The movers are coming, so I'll take everything I bought with me. I wish you could erase even the trace that you were here, my mother-in-law retorted. As she wished, I cleared out all the furniture and appliances, everything I had paid for with my part-time job money, besides the rent and living expenses. Watching the procession of my belongings being taken out, my mother-in-law started to panic. Wait, Anna, what are you doing? If you take all this, how will we live? To leave no trace behind. I'm taking everything I bought. You can start a completely new life tomorrow, I said, suppressing a laugh. I ignored her protests and had everything taken out. She complained loudly to the movers, but there was nothing she could do. All that was left in the house were the piles of baby hair and her old dresser from before the marriage. Well then, I bid you farewell. There should be no trace of me left, so enjoy your life with Simon Michael and his family, I said, leaving her sitting there stunned. I put the keys on the table and left the room. I had asked the movers to hold onto my things for a while and decided to stay with a colleague. Feeling a sense of closure, I slept peacefully that night. A week later, I finally heard from my husband. I wondered if he was still involved with that other woman. While my husband was slow to contact me, I received a call from a young woman who had taken a photo at a tavern. The picture showed my husband talking to an older woman and later entering a hotel with her. Seeing this, I felt my last bit of affection for my husband disappear. I asked for the woman's name and address and got all the evidence of the affair. When my husband called, he asked where I was and mentioned that Michael and his family were at the house, hinting that they needed a place to stay. I told him I wasn't coming back. I knew Michael and his family were struggling financially and wanted to stay at our place. I also reminded him that his mother and Michael never really accepted me. My husband's pleas for me to come back only confirmed his lack of respect for me. A few days later, I returned to the house for the first time in a while. There were new furniture and appliances inside. When Michael and Sarah saw me, they just nodded from the sofa. My mother-in-law gave me a harsh look, and the tension in the room was palpable. I planned to get things done quickly and leave. Michael spoke up, asking why I was there. He complained that I had taken everything from the house and called me a monster, claiming that Dad had been supporting me and that I had it easy. I told Michael I took everything because I had paid for it all and wanted to remove any trace of myself, just as they wanted. I mentioned it was crazy for him to think I could afford everything while working part-time at the pharmacy. My husband hadn't even talked to his mother about our financial situation yet. Looking at my husband, who seemed resigned, he said that we had been managing on what Anna and I earned for a while. He added that the items I took should be considered ours. I decided to explain. Simon's company had been struggling, and his salary had dropped, so I had been covering the shortfall for the past 5 years. Now, I was paying the rent too. My mother-in-law was surprised. I added that I wasn't just a part-time worker. I was a part-time pharmacist with a good salary, earning more than Simon now. My husband looked away awkwardly, and my mother-in-law was looking back and forth between us in confusion. I told Michael that from now on, he would be responsible for paying the rent. After all the support his grandmother had given, it was his turn to take care of her. Michael was shocked when I said the rent was $5,600. I told him I didn't have to take care of him anymore and that he needed to get his act together since he would soon be a father. Michael shook his head and said it was impossible. Sarah then raised her voice, asking how they were supposed to manage the $5,600 rent since they were supposed to live there for free, especially since Michael only made $30,000 a month. I almost laughed when Sarah seemed worried. I told her not to stress, she could move to a cheaper place. Simon still had a decent salary. Sarah's expression relaxed a bit. I then mentioned that since I was leaving, Simon's life might get tougher with his new mistress. Sarah finally broke down in tears. My husband, Simon, panicked and asked what I was talking about. I told him his mother had informed me about the new woman, and I was ending my role as his wife too. Simon seemed to think I was lying. He insisted that he only had eyes for me, but it was clear he didn't believe there was any evidence. I reminded him that it hadn't even been 10 days since I left and hinted that Mary might be hurt if she knew. When I mentioned Mary, Simon was visibly startled. Realizing I knew everything, he looked distressed and said this wasn't the right time to discuss divorce papers. I told him I would handle it through a lawyer and decided to leave. As I got up to leave, my mother-in-law slammed her hands on the table and yelled at me, blaming me for everything going wrong at home. I was irritated and reminded her it was her who told me to leave and who mentioned Simon's affair. I felt angry for not being more assertive with Michael, and I regretted letting my mother-in-law interfere with my relationship. My mother-in-law insisted that I needed to support Simon as his wife and take responsibility. I was frustrated, knowing if she hadn't interfered, I would have continued to support Simon and the home I believed in. I told my mother-in-law firmly that I didn't need any roles anymore and there was no going back. I looked her straight in the eyes and said that I was never truly accepted as a family member, so I couldn't take responsibility as one. She looked upset and started to tremble. I quickly left the room. Afterward, Simon agreed to the divorce without much fuss. It seemed my determination and the evidence of the affair convinced him. Soon after, they began moving out of the apartment. Michael and Sarah moved back to their own place and never lived with Simon's mother. Simon was considering remarriage, but Mary was angry about the alimony and his request for her to live with his mother. I heard they were thinking about putting Simon's mother in a care facility. It was sad to think that after all the love she gave her son and grandson, they were ready to abandon her. If my mother-in-law hadn't interfered, maybe things would have been different. Maybe we would still be living together after the divorce. Michael sent me an apology letter. He wrote about how he wanted to be more spoiled as a child, how he couldn't talk to me because his grandmother didn't like it, and how he was happy when I attended school events. I regretted not reaching out more and wondered if we could have had a different relationship. Even though our relationship has ended, I quietly wish Michael happiness in life. I've returned to work as a pharmacist and rented an apartment close to work. I didn't feel right keeping the furniture and appliances I took, so I had them disposed of. Life without my mother-in-law's harassment is peaceful, and I now focus on living for my own happiness, not for anyone else.